Great, thank you everyone. I will invite my fellow panelists to come and join us. We have 3 esteemed panelists here today, as well as the moderator from the last session, Yolanda, who will join us in case there are some translation needs. So welcome to the stage. We have Mr. Vil Servio from Nice. Welcome. Mr. Carmelo Duran-Mueller from Guatemala, the Presidential Commission on Open and Electronic Government. Welcome. And Mr. Carmelo speaks English but may want to express himself in Spanish, so Yolanda will help. And finally, we have Mr. Ivan Yui from the Philippines, from the Ministry of ICT. Welcome. Great. Thank you all. As mentioned, I'm with the Digital Impact Alliance, the Director of Policy. We have an esteemed leader, Priya Vora, so I would not want to take her spot. The Digital Impact Alliance, or DIAL, has been doing a lot of work on this question of DPG implementation and sustainability with partners over the years through different initiatives. So as mentioned, we're one of the core partners on the GovStack initiative with ITU and Estonia. We also helped to implement the Charter for Digital Public Goods, which was mentioned earlier, along with the Digital Public Goods Alliance, which is in the room. And through that process, or these different initiatives, I think what we really learned was that digital public goods, which kind of shorthand open source software for the public good, meets the standards set out by the UN Secretary General and is shepherded by the DPGA, is one option. There's a lot of reasons why governments might want to use DPGs. It's not the only option. But what we really need to do is help to make it a more viable option. How can we build the market up, create the conditions? So if you want something that's open source, if you want to be able to customize your own code to reuse those services that have been created and worked elsewhere, how can you be sure that it's sustainable, that you have the vendors that you need to support when there are challenges, that you're going to get all the cybersecurity updates that you need, right? There's a lot that goes along with implementing software, and we need to make sure that those preconditions are met so that governments can be confident to do that. And so we have a really great panel to help us dig into where we are on DPG sustainability and how that fits into this building block approach, right? So you can take different types of software, whether open source or not open source, and plug and play because you've set up your infrastructure using this GovStack model of building blocks. So I'm going to start out with Mr. Sevier here, who has been working with Nice, which has really led the way in this idea of shepherding a digital public good, in this case X-Road, along with 3 different countries. And so can you tell us more about Nice, a little intro for the audience here, and talk a bit about how we can use this model to help promote DPG sustainability and viability in the government context?
Yes, thank you. So NIS, or Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions, is a non-profit association which was founded by Estonia and Finland together, and nowadays Iceland is the 3rd government participating in this collaboration. And with NIS we have kind of 2 different things. So first, NIS as a platform. It's a platform for cooperation, and I think it's, if not first, at least one of the first initiatives in the world when governments are developing open source software together in a cross-border context, and that's very unique. The second thing is NIS products, as you mentioned, X-Road. X-Road started here in Estonia, as most of you probably know after being here for a few times. So it has its roots here, and many still know it as Estonian, but in fact it's already deployed around the world in more than 20 countries. And currently we have a strong community of some 3,000 plus people in our X-Road community Slack from over 140 countries. So actually X-Road has grown much bigger than if we think about the population in our member countries. I mean, it's more users worldwide nowadays. And I think X-Road is a fine example of what a digital public good can do. And we also recognize some of the challenges what have been discussed also here during this event, that actually many of the things what are required to successfully deploy a digital public good are not technical. And I may be repeating myself in some events, but I always like to say that if we think about the deployments worldwide with X-Road, it's quite often about human change management, renewing processes, going over the first kind of discussions on how can we get started, and finally enter into some kind of proof of concept or pilot project. So this is maybe one of the topics we have learned with X-Road, which is related to what we're discussing today.
Great, thank you so much. That's a good kind of broad introduction since you've helped so many countries with this adoption. I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Ui. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I know we haven't had the chance to speak. I do know that the Philippines has been a leader in implementing MOSEP, which is a DPG, for the identity layer of your DPI. But I would love to hear more from your perspective on what some of the opportunities and challenges are with DPG implementation in the Philippines.
Well, the Philippines currently is on a digital transformation journey. And we're actually integrating a lot of the different government systems into a single platform. So our challenge are dealing with all the different silos of digitalization that has happened over the decades. So there are many legacy systems, there are proprietary systems, there are open systems, and looking at how all these can be interoperable is a significant challenge. And today, with more developments using APIs and using cloud computing, there are certain tools that allow us to bridge those gaps. However, one of the biggest challenges that we have, especially on open source, are the internal capacity and the skill sets that would be needed in order to not only understand the technology, but how to effectively deploy it. Unlike procuring software from specific vendors, they have a full support team that comes into play, whether you're talking about cybersecurity or being able to migrate from one system to the other. But the danger there is, as everybody knows, is a vendor lock-in. And once we lock in, whatever upgrade needs to be done cannot be done without the vendor's participation. And so we're trapped. We're trapped, and we cannot move out of it unless it becomes a very painful process of moving out. On the other hand, with open source systems, what happens is, specifically with government, government pay is notoriously low. And so when we develop the necessary knowledge and skill sets for a digital workforce that's attuned to handling open source, we cannot keep them for long. And they get pirated to the private sector or to international organizations. Then we're left with people who are strangers to the system. And again, this time the system is hostage, not because of a vendor, but because of the lack of understanding. And from there, we are then now forced to procure from providers that are familiar with those open source systems, which may not necessarily be cheaper than the vendor lock-in systems. And so that's where we face these challenges in choosing between the two options.
Yeah, that's a great point. We recently published a white paper where we put that my colleague, who's more of an expert than I am, insisted we make sure to mention that there is also a risk of vendor lock-in with open source, but more from the third parties than from the original provider. So I will pass it over to Mr. Mueller. Thank you for joining us. And he is here from Guatemala. He's part of the Presidential Commission on Open and Electronic Government. And I understand that Guatemala recently became a member of the DPGA, so that's great news. I would love to hear a little bit more from your perspective on, similarly, what are the opportunities and the challenges that you see, and why would you choose to join the DPGA and be part of this journey?
No, thank you for the invitation. This is very important for Guatemala to be here, and I don't want to miss the opportunity. So given my language limitations, I will rely on Yolanda Martinez in translation. Thank you. After reading the book written by Simsikut, Digital Governance Excellence, I see that all the countries have the same problems. And here I confirm that. En Guatemala tenemos la misma limitación de personal, la misma limitación de sistemas legados, pero principalmente creo que tenemos un problema más estructural. Creo que el problema es tener una visión como país y tener una visión como gobierno, en la cual no sea una visión.
One moment, maybe just to
Okay,
get this.
perfect. Okay.
And to complement on what you found in Sim's book, and also what Secretary Ivan was saying, Carmelo was sharing with us how in Guatemala the same challenges appear in terms of change management resistance, legacy systems. But one of the major challenges is that of lack of joint and mutual vision for what digital means in Guatemala.
Yes. De tal manera de que lo que tenemos que estar haciendo es que todos vayamos hacia un mismo camino. Yolanda sabe que he sido un promotor de los DGPs, recientemente firmado en Guatemala, porque tenemos la limitación en Guatemala que empezamos tarde. He escuchado a las exposiciones acá y hay varios países que ya han avanzado hace años, y Guatemala recientemente empezó la carrera, por decirlo así. De tal manera que en Guatemala, y personalmente creo que los bienes públicos digitales son una excelente opción para acortar esa brecha que existe entre los que ya avanzaron a los que vamos de último.
Following on that, Carmelo and I testify that, is a true believer on the power of DPGs to close the gap between countries that started a digital journey from the 90s, like the case of Estonia, and countries like Guatemala that came a little bit late, but really see in DPGs and reusability of building blocks a way to accelerate and shorten that gap to digital transformation.
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. So digging in, I know we don't have a ton of time, but I'm curious, we heard some of the challenges with implementing DPGs, and I think NIS offers one model for overcoming some of these challenges. So I'd love to hear more from you as how can associations like NIS help to overcome some of these capacity challenges? Should we be looking to establish more, expanding, the amount of products under your umbrella? How can we overcome some of these capacity challenges that we heard about from the Philippines?
Yeah, for NIS, it has been sometimes challenging to help and support different projects around the world, even indirectly, because we are a small team of 5 people plus our development team of less than 10 developers working on X-Road and other products. But from the beginning, we have thought that because of this limitation, we actually want to document our product well. So we have put lots of effort in X-Road documentation, knowledge base, training, offering free X-Road Academy, which is available for anyone around the world to study the basics of X-Road. So quite much of the challenges that we have seen, because we are not part of the implementations, we are not in the deployment projects, but just a software vendor. But the feedback we are hearing is that it's much appreciated that actually there are lots of resources available. And that hopefully is to be the case with most of the digital public goods or digital public infrastructure solutions. And one challenge which adds a bit of complexity is that when we are releasing our documentation and training and everything in English, but there are plenty of countries requiring documentation in different languages. So, for example, our team is not capable of producing documentation in Spanish. So, so that's one challenge which is very difficult to solve by us. But I think it's a thing to consider, like in all this kind of digital infrastructure projects, that how you make the documentation. And finally, if I think about the deployment projects, I'm always saying that knowledge transfer and training should be an essential part of the procurement. So when any infrastructure solution like X-Road is being deployed, there should be a plan how we train our local companies and competencies and start like building the skills within the country for working on that solution. As you were mentioning about this challenge of finding the vendor in some cases, whether it's open source solution and companies might disappear. So capacity building, getting your resources trained and the local companies involved in the development and maintenance, that's the thing.
Great, thank you. I think that's all very practical for countries that are on this journey. Speaking of being on the journey, I'm thinking about what we heard our colleague from USAID, Chris Burns, say about, in the past decade, there's been silos, which you've also mentioned, this idea of each ministry making their own decisions. I'd love to hear maybe from both of you, from the Philippines and from Guatemala, where are you on this journey? How are you overcoming some of these historical silos? Are some of these new technologies, new terms that we are using, are they helpful? Are they hurting? How can we as a community, as the GovStat community, help to continue to overcome some of the silos that have prevented true digital transformation over the years?
Who goes first? I'll go first.
You can go first, yes.
Well, we recently launched our eGov Super App. This is actually an application that consolidates all the different apps of the different government agencies. And so with the right API design and identifying actually which government agencies are the low-hanging fruits. So these are the ones that are already more mature in their digital journey and have the internal capacity to optimize their database, to optimize their system in order to seamlessly connect to our central singular sign-on API. So we start with those agencies because that's where the early wins come in. And once it's there, the other government agencies see it, and they're now pressured to be on board. Otherwise, they'll be left out, and the public actually will now put pressure on them, saying, "Why are you not in this single platform where everybody is signing on once, and they can now do public transactions with the public entities seamlessly?" But critical to that is a national identity system. Because without that single process of verifying the authenticity of the identity of the person going into that system, then the whole system will not work. And in the past, with silos, a person can have different identities accessing different parts of the government service. But so with that integrated app, you need to really strengthen the capability of verifying the person's identity through biometric to multi-factor authentication and so on. So that's where we have been able to approach it with a national single ID on a national single sign-on system and on an eKYC platform.
Great, thank you for those very practical examples.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
please.
El primer paso que estamos haciendo, bueno, realmente son en dos acciones que estamos haciendo los cambios. Uno, hace 2 años se implementó una ley de simplificación de trámites, que eso permite que ya todos los ministerios estén trabajando de una manera más conjunta, que aplica únicamente al sistema ejecutivo, no a todo el gobierno. Y la otra acción que estamos haciendo es un cambio de mentalidad. Y la razón de que estoy aquí, por eso les decía que es tan importante para Guatemala venir a Estonia, es el año pasado fue la primera vez que vine a Estonia y decían, Carmelo, estás loco, ¿qué vas a ir a hacer a Estonia? ¿Dónde queda? Pero yo ya había estudiado Estonia sabiendo que iban adelante. Entonces, estamos queriendo romper esquemas, yéndonos a conocer a los que van de primero. Nosotros que estamos apenas empezando queremos ir a lo de los primeros. En resumen, acciones legales y acciones de cambio de mente. Eso.
Two actions that Guatemala government has taken over the past 2 years. Number one is legal actions through a new law to simplify services that has made it mandatory for government entities to work together in simplification of government procedures. And the second action is a change in mentality. And Carmelo was sharing that last year, when he mentioned that he got invited into Tallinn Digital Summit, his peers told him, "You're crazy. Where is Estonia?" And he came, he got inspired. He felt that learning from the best is also a very good way to shorten the actions that are being taken in Guatemala. And he's very happy to be in the second year in the Tallinn Digital Summit to further increase the learning and sharing with his peers back in Guatemala best practices on Estonia Digital Journey.
De hecho, estoy muy contento porque este año ya vino otra persona de Guatemala a Estonia.
So today, the delegation is 2. Last year, it was only Carmelo. This year is 2.
100%.
Yes.
100%. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I see this bright red sign, so I know that we are out of time. This has been a great conversation. This panel came together at fairly much at the last minute, and I think it all worked out beautifully. And I will just kind of one final pitch for something to look out for. Dial is currently in the process of refreshing the principles for digital development that you may have heard of. And I think all of this is great content for when we start to think about these 9 digital principles and how they can remain relevant going forward. And just thankful on behalf of the GovStack community. And I will pass it back to our super moderator for some Q&A. But thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Meyer. Thank you for a good panel. So now we have time for questions. And let me just, everybody can have a question, just show of hands where the mic should go. And the panel members from all 3 panels are around somewhere and they can also answer. I hope they have the mic still in their heads. But if you have a question, please identify yourself and also to whom you have the question. But I see already some hands, and it doesn't have to be a question, it can be a statement. But having the first microphone, I just would like to take the opportunity and ask the first question. The first panel was about the donors. And the EU representative said, well, the money is not an object. The USAID guy said basically the same. The third big bankroller actually has, for the GovStack specifically, the main bankroller altogether has been the German government. And so I have a question to Mrs. Katharina Mans. Exactly a month ago, on the 4th of August, I read a news from EU Observer that the German federal government is slashing the digitization budget by 99%. does it also mean that all the German support is disappearing, or we can hear some encouraging words that German government is going to continue supporting GovStack? Thank you. So where is Katarina? Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Iva. And you are right. The German government has given a lot of funds for the GovStack initiative. And so I can only repeat what you said. I would like to invite everybody else to give their money. And because money is an issue, actually. And we've all seen that budgets are cut. And this also applies to Germany, and this is why we actually would like to look into the future. What happens to the GovStack initiative once the initiative might end? And we need to look beyond this year 25. And so, yes. USAID, why not? We take everybody's money. We've heard a lot about the importance of DPI and DPG and of the GovStack initiative, and I think we would be all very, very happy if we could prolong this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and let's hope really that it continues that way. So where were the questions on the mic, please?
Yeah, just a question from this side. So it's also about money. Great, we've got the building blocks, which drops the cost base. Great, it's the focus on humanity, that public and services and citizens can use it. My question is about the business models. And in terms of how to ensure sustainability, I'm wondering how everyone else does it. Do you charge citizens on a per transaction basis, on a per API call basis? Do you monetize it in the back end using advertising? Because you've got lots of eyeballs watching those screens, those super apps the Philippines mentioned. How does the money work, and how do you make it sustainable without the citizen fully knowing that they're actually paying for it a different way? Or are there different monetization models out there which speaks more to sustainability rather than making billions out of the thing?
Great question, and who do you... I think maybe Yolanda, you will want to answer first, because you have this global view, and she also forgot to tell, for those who don't know her yet too well, she used to be the CIO of Mexico, so she has plenty of experience. You have the mic.
Thank you. Very important elements in what you kindly share in terms of sustainability. I think working with DPGs really helps cost efficiency when government is structuring their enterprise architecture. And usually you need to keep a balance between licensed products and open source products. And that's what the value of GovStack is, that everything that we have developed so far is technology neutral, is open source, everything is documented, and Vilay mentioned how relevant it is to have good documentation, so I kindly invite everyone to visit GovStack Global website. You'll find all the links to our Gitbook resources, technical specifications, API definitions, the simulation on the sandbox. The communities of practices are so relevant, and the GovTech ecosystem is key in the sustainability model. We just came back from 10 days deep dive in Egypt, working with the government technical team, the companies that are providers of the government in digitization of government services. Kenya Roadshow as well is a partnership ecosystem, as was mentioned also by the Tallinn representative of the cluster. And sustainability comes with having the flexibility of quickly catch up with technology, but always keeping digital service design at the core of what the user needs. And the more cost efficient, the easier it is to develop platforms that are open, that are collaborative, and easy for the citizens to use.
Thank you, Yolanda. And we have a couple of more questions. I mean, their time ran to 0, but my time says that we have 5 more minutes easily. So we'll have a couple of questions. You can use my mic here. Leave it to somebody. So please.
Okay, maybe I'll start, but I will actually then, I think we can seamlessly hand over to our friends from Ethiopia afterwards, because it's kind of a linked comment. So I'm actually going to try to say something quickly that I hope can tie together the 3 panels. And I would like to touch upon... Yes, thank you, Thomas. So I co-lead the Secretariat of the Digital Public Goods Alliance. My name is Liv Nordhaug. Thank you, Thomas. So first of all, I wanted to pick up quickly on what I believe that was Mr. Ajemian, and I think he's sitting there around this distinction between the core and the need to focus our investments on the core. And maybe to touch upon the previous comment on sustainability and how can we kind of mobilize the resources towards where they can make the biggest difference. So I do think that I completely agree with what Mr. Ajemian was saying initially, that there's really a need to focus on this foundational registries, the ID, the payment systems, the things that all other use cases build on top of, or all use cases build on top of. I do see a tremendous role for digital public goods, as in open source components that can help countries build out these capabilities as a way of focusing our efforts and some of our open efforts on the core. So that's one part. The second part, and that was to some of what was said in the procurement panel. And I mean, I'm a Norwegian, so I will say that as well, and I saw Norway was on there. And I know that there are multiple countries, I mean, Estonia among them, who are sharing their own technologies, open source, as digital public goods. That is a way of driving sustainability when you have these kind of joint governance models and sharing of technologies that would maybe not be monetized because they're just part of basic public service delivery for the countries. So that's another call to action. And then lastly, on the last panel, and I also hope I pronounced this correctly, Mr. Uy of the Philippines. I really, really commend the Philippines for having been the first adopter, together with Morocco, of MOSIP, a digital public good. And I very much agree with your important comment about the need to have a qualified vendor ecosystem, systems integrators that can help countries implement these digital public goods. I do think this is very much now happening with MOSIP and the ecosystem around MOSIP, but it takes time. And I do think there's a lot to learn from the X-Road model and NIS. But I do believe it's a fundamentally important topic, and I just want to congratulate and thank the Philippines for having been willing to move early on adopting a digital public good, because it's also showing the way for many other countries now who are learning also from some of the procurement reforms you had to make and some of the very difficult decisions you made in paving out and mapping out this journey. So just wanted to thank you. And I do know that we have Ethiopia here also, so I would love to hand the mic over there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to make it very short because of the time. So just to share some experiences on what Ethiopia has been doing with regards to implementing DPGs. So we recently started a national identification system based on MOSIP, which is a DPG also implemented in the Philippines. And so when we first started, when we thought of the idea to implement MOSIP for the digital ID, we were not very aware of DPIs and DPGs. They were not very known by that time. I think it was 2019. But we basically chose it because of the principles. So the principles aligned with what we envisioned for the system. So we wanted it to be scalable. We wanted to be secure and interoperable. And so just purely based on the principles, we decided to go for MOSIP. And then once we learned about the DPIs, we were fascinated by all the principles and how it aligns with what National ID wants to implement for the country. And so now we are looking for ways so how we could implement the DPGs and the governance and just the entirety of the digital infrastructure as we're working towards the digital transformation. We have a 5-year plan for Digital Ethiopia 2025, and this aligns to how we want growth. And as it was mentioned in one of the panels in the first one, digital is an enabler, not the ultimate purpose, and we want to see growth. And so it was very informative learning from the Philippines and how the digital ID served as the base in order to implement other apps, other connections. And we can't wait to see how the DPIs play out in the digital transformation and growth of the country.
Okay, thank you very much. And well, I can see a lot of excitement in the room, and I saw more hands, but the organizers informed us that we have to stop here and now for today. But I hope you have the material for this kind of meetings. It's very clear that they are necessary. I've been around with these meetings since end of 1990s, and I mean, when I was listening to the Philippines and to the Guatemala cases, and now I mean, I've had these questions, and I helped to answer to a lot of them already long time ago, but they still come up, and so the GovStack really does have a useful function, I believe. And I wish you all, and I think you all join me wishing GovStack well. So thank you very much, everybody. And this event is over.